All right, so let's jump right into it. Today we're going to do a deep dive into a whole bunch of news articles covering, some pretty major global events. We're talking international relations, climate change, humanitarian crises, the whole shebang playing out on the world stage.
Right.
And we've got reports from sources like the Associated Press, Tagesschau.de.
Oh, wow.
So we're dealing with some serious heavy hitters here.
Yeah, that's some pretty credible stuff.
Yeah, the real deal.
Yeah.
So basically, to kind of wrap our heads around all of this, we're going to focus on three key areas.
Okay.
First up, the conflicts in the Middle East.
Okay.
Specifically, the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza.
Right.
And then also the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Gotcha.
Then we're going to shift gears a bit.
Okay.
Look at the UN climate conference that's coming up in Baku.
Right.
And kind of what that might mean for global climate goals.
Okay, yeah.
And finally, we're going to take a look at China's expanding influence in South America.
Interesting.
And we'll use the example of this new megaport in Peru to kind of illustrate that.
I see.
So, I mean, starting off with these conflicts, it's just heartbreaking to see the human cost of all of this.
Oh, absolutely.
There was this really tragic incident in Tyre, Lebanon.
Oh, yeah.
Where an Israeli airstrike ended up killing at least 7 people.
Oh, my gosh.
And 5 of them were siblings.
Wow.
And 3 of the siblings were deaf and mute.
Oh, that's
just a devastating, devastating situation.
Yeah.
And it really kind of drives home the point
that
behind all the headlines, behind all the politics, there are real people whose lives are being shattered by this.
Absolutely.
And the conflict's not just limited to Gaza either.
Right.
The situation between Israel and Hezbollah has just escalated like crazy. Israeli airstrikes have been targeting Beirut's southern suburbs and other areas in Lebanon. We're seeing more civilian casualties, widespread destruction.
Yeah, it sounds like things are just spiraling out of control.
Yeah, and it's getting really hard to see, how it's going to be contained.
Right.
And then on top of all of that, Qatar, which has been a key player in trying to mediate the Israel-Hamas conflict, has actually suspended its efforts.
Oh, wow.
Because there's just been no progress on a ceasefire agreement for Gaza.
It's just such a difficult situation,
Yeah.
There's so much mistrust and so many competing interests.
Yeah, and to make things even more complicated,
there
were reports that Qatar might actually ask the remaining Hamas leadership to leave the country.
Oh, really?
Which, I mean, raises a whole bunch of new questions.
Oh, for sure.
Where will they go?
Yeah.
How's that going to affect future peace talks?
Exactly.
It's just, it's another layer of complexity to this whole situation. Yeah. Meanwhile, in Gaza, the humanitarian situation is becoming more and more dire every day.
I can only imagine.
I mean, there are warnings of famine.
Really?
In the north.
Wow.
Huge portions of the population are displaced.
God.
Israel started sending in some aid,
Yeah.
but there are a lot of doubts about whether it's going to be enough.
Yeah, it just feels like a never-ending cycle of suffering.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
So, I mean, shifting gears a little bit to the global stage.
Yeah.
The UN Climate Conference, also known as COP29, is going to be taking place in Baku, Azerbaijan.
Okay.
It's going to be a big one.
Right.
The focus is going to be on these climate goals.
Yeah.
Particularly that 1.5 degrees Celsius target.
Yeah, that's the big one.
But, the latest reports aren't looking too good.
Really?
We're seeing these record high global temperatures, and the consequences of inaction are becoming more and more clear.
Yeah, it's getting hard to ignore.
Yeah, and experts are expressing some serious doubts.
I bet.
About whether we're even going to be able to hit that 1.5 degree target.
That's concerning.
They're saying we need political will. We need immediate action to cut down those emissions.
Right. It's not enough to just talk about it anymore.
Yeah, we got to walk the walk.
Yeah.
And here's a curveball.
Okay.
The Taliban is going to be participating in the UN Climate Conference.
What?
For the first time since they took control of Afghanistan.
Wow, that's unexpected.
It's a big deal, right?
Definitely.
It marks a potential return to the international stage for them.
Yeah.
Raises all sorts of questions.
Oh, for sure.
What's their role going to be?
Yeah.
Are they going to be genuine partners in this?
Right.
I mean, it's a really complex situation.
Yeah.
But, their presence really just highlights the fact that
Yeah.
climate change is a global issue.
Absolutely.
We all got to work together on this.
Everyone.
So finally, let's turn our attention to China and their growing influence, especially in South America.
Right.
You know, they've got this new Silk Road initiative, which is really expanding their presence there.
Yeah.
And a prime example of that is this newly operational megaport in Shaanxi, Peru.
Wow, a megaport.
Yeah, it's huge.
That's
It basically gives China greater access to all these resources in the region.
I see.
So, I mean, it's this intersection of economics and geopolitics, right?
Right.
Because on the one hand, you know, this investment in infrastructure can bring a lot of economic benefits
For sure.
to these South American countries.
Yeah.
But it also raises concerns about,
Yeah.
you know, potential political and economic dependencies.
Right. Like, are they becoming too reliant on China?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
And so that's something that policymakers and analysts are watching very closely.
I bet.
So we've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah, we have.
Escalating conflicts in the Middle East.
Right.
A crucial climate conference coming up. China's global footprint expanding.
It's a lot.
What really stands out to you from all of this?
You know, for me, it's just how all of these seemingly separate issues are actually really deeply intertwined.
Yeah.
You know, we see conflicts that are made worse by resource scarcity,
Right.
which is obviously linked to climate change.
Exactly.
Global power dynamics are shifting as countries like China assert themselves, you know, economically and politically.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we live in a really interconnected world.
Yeah, it's like a domino effect, right?
Yeah, exactly.
One event can trigger a chain reaction across the globe.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to stay informed and to understand these connections.
I agree.
You know, we need to be having these conversations about the challenges and the opportunities that we face
Absolutely.
as a global community.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
Now, let's dig a little deeper into the humanitarian crisis
Okay.
that's unfolded in Gaza. It's a situation that demands our attention,
Yeah.
and it compels us to really think about
Yeah.
what can be done to alleviate the suffering there.
Absolutely. It's a multi-layered crisis. And there are so many factors that have contributed to its current state. You know, we really need to understand these factors if we're going to effectively address the humanitarian needs of the Palestinian people.
For sure.
Yeah.
As we said, you know, the war in Gaza has created this really dire humanitarian situation.
Yeah.
Famine is a real threat in the north,
Right.
and the majority of the population's been displaced.
It's important to remember, though, that this crisis didn't just, you know, appear overnight. This is the culmination of, you know, a longstanding conflict, political deadlock, economic hardship.
Right.
And now the war's just kind of exacerbated all these issues.
Which makes finding a solution that much more challenging, right?
For sure.
It's not just about, you know, delivering immediate aid,
Right.
although that's obviously critical.
Of course.
But it's also about tackling the underlying issues
Exactly.
that have led to this point.
Yeah, it demands a
Yeah.
multifaceted approach,
Right.
one that involves, you know, political dialogue, economic development, a genuine commitment to peace and security for all sides.
Absolutely. And we mentioned that limited aid that Israel has begun sending into Gaza.
Right.
But the situation in the north is particularly worrying.
Yeah.
Because it's been largely cut off from aid for about a month.
And that's why you see those reports about, you know, looming famine in that region.
Yeah.
It's really alarming.
It's really scary.
Food shortages, lack of clean water, inadequate medical supplies.
Right.
It's just a truly desperate situation for the people trapped there.
And especially with that recent report from the Integrated Food Security Phase classification.
The IPC.
Yeah, the IPC.
Yeah.
Saying that famine is likely imminent in parts of northern Gaza.
That report is a, you know, stark warning. We can't ignore it.
Right.
It highlights just how urgent the situation is.
Right.
The need for immediate and ongoing action to prevent a full-blown humanitarian catastrophe.
Now, Israel has challenged the findings of that report, claiming that it relied on biased data.
Right.
But even if the situation isn't at the level of famine just yet, it's clear that the crisis is severe and that it demands, you know, a robust response.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't afford to get bogged down in semantics when people's lives are at stake.
Right.
The focus needs to be on getting aid to those who need it most. And that means ensuring, you know, safe and unimpeded access for these humanitarian organizations that are operating in the region.
And speaking of access, the UN has been pushing for Israel to allow more aid trucks into Gaza.
Okay.
They said that at least 350 trucks
Wow.
carrying food and other supplies should be allowed in daily?
Daily.
Daily, yeah.
Okay.
And there's also this looming deadline from the U.S., which has warned Israel that it risks losing access to U.S. weapons funding.
Oh, wow.
If it doesn't improve those aid deliveries. It's a big deal.
It's a big deal, yeah.
I mean, that pressure from the international community, particularly from the U.S.,
Right.
it's a significant development.
Yeah, I mean, it suggests that,
Yeah.
patience is wearing thin
Right.
with this slow pace of aid delivery,
Right.
and that there are real consequences for not meeting those humanitarian obligations.
Absolutely. And it just really underscores the importance of international cooperation in addressing this crisis.
For sure.
It's not just about, one country or organization
Right.
taking action.
It's going to be a collective effort.
It's got to be a collective effort.
Yeah.
So we've talked about, the immense challenges.
Yeah.
But what about potential solutions?
Right.
What needs to happen to really bring about meaningful change and alleviate the suffering in Gaza?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there are no easy answers.
Right.
But I think a few key elements are crucial.
Okay.
First and foremost, a ceasefire.
Yeah.
The violence has got to stop
Right.
to allow for humanitarian access and to create space for dialogue.
I agree. It's hard to imagine,
Yeah.
any real progress being made
Right.
while the fighting continues.
Yeah.
So a ceasefire is absolutely essential.
Absolutely.
Secondly, this is equally important.
Okay.
We need a political solution
Right.
that addresses those root causes of the conflict.
Now, this is where things get really tricky.
Yeah.
Decades of mistrust, failed negotiations.
Right.
It's hard to see a clear path to a lasting peace agreement.
Do you think the recent suspension of Qatar's mediation efforts will significantly impact the chances of achieving a ceasefire?
It's definitely a setback.
Yeah.
Qatar played a vital role
Right.
in facilitating communication between Hamas and Israel in the past.
Right.
Their absence creates a void that needs to be filled by other actors,
Right.
perhaps Egypt
Yeah.
or other Arab states.
It really reinforces the fact that,
Yeah.
finding a solution to this conflict requires the involvement and the commitment of the broader international community.
Absolutely. This isn't just a regional issue.
Right.
It has global implications.
Right.
And a peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is in everyone's best interest.
We've talked about the need for a political solution, a ceasefire.
Yeah.
What about the economic dimension of this crisis?
That's a critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Gaza's economy has been devastated by years of conflict and blockade.
Right.
So rebuilding infrastructure, creating job opportunities, fostering economic growth.
Right.
All of that is essential for long-term stability and well-being.
It's about creating a sense of hope.
Exactly,
Yeah.
especially for younger generations.
Yeah.
Invested in education, healthcare.
Yeah.
Economic empowerment.
Right.
It's vital to break in that cycle of poverty and despair.
So while the situation in Gaza is incredibly challenging, there are potential paths forward. It requires that combination of immediate humanitarian aid,
Right.
long-term political dialogue,
Yes.
and a commitment to economic development.
Exactly. And it requires sustained attention and engagement
Right.
from the international community.
Right.
We can't afford to turn away from this crisis.
The stakes are too high.
Now that we've really, taken a deep dive into the complexities of the Gaza crisis, let's shift our focus to another pressing global challenge.
Okay.
The upcoming UN climate conference, or COP29.
All right.
What are some of the key issues that are likely to, dominate the discussions in Baku?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, achieving that 1.5 degrees Celsius target
Right.
is going to be front and center.
Right.
And the latest scientific reports
Yeah.
paint a pretty bleak picture.
Yeah. Suggesting that we're not on track to meet that goal.
And that's a major concern, right?
It is.
I mean, exceeding that target could have
Yeah.
catastrophic consequences,
Absolutely.
particularly for vulnerable countries and communities.
We're already seeing,
Yeah.
more extreme weather events.
Right.
Rising sea levels, disruptions to ecosystems.
Yeah.
The urgency of the situation just cannot be overstated.
So what needs to happen at COP29 to kind of get us back on track?
Well, first, we need stronger commitments from nations to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. The current pledges just aren't ambitious enough
Right.
to keep warming below 1.5 degrees.
And that requires political will,
It does.
which, as we've discussed, can be in short supply.
Yeah, indeed. But there are some encouraging signs.
Okay.
The cost of renewable energy technologies has plummeted in recent years,
Right.
making them increasingly competitive with fossil fuels. And that presents a real opportunity for countries to transition to cleaner energy sources.
And we can't forget the role of innovation,
Right.
developing and deploying new technologies
Yeah.
like carbon capture and storage
Yeah, for
are
sure.
going to be crucial.
Absolutely. Technological advancements are going to play a critical role in decarbonizing the global economy.
So stronger emissions reduction targets, a focus on innovation.
Yeah.
What other important issues are likely to be on the agenda at COP29?
Well, financing climate action is going to be a major topic.
Okay.
Developing countries, which are often the most vulnerable to climate impacts, they need financial support to adapt to the changing climate and to transition to low-carbon economies.
It's about making sure
Yeah,
that the costs and benefits of climate action are shared equitably.
precisely.
Right.
There'll also be discussions about loss and damage,
Okay.
which refers to the irreversible impacts of climate change that are simply impossible to adapt to.
This is a particularly contentious issue.
Oh, absolutely.
With developing countries calling for compensation from developed nations
Right.
who historically have been the biggest emitters.
Exactly. It's a complex issue with both moral and financial dimensions.
Right.
And finding a fair and effective way to address loss and damage is going to be a major challenge at COP29.
And then, of course, there's that unexpected inclusion of the Taliban in this year's climate conference.
It's a development that raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, for sure.
On the one hand, it's important for all countries to be a part of these climate negotiations.
Yeah.
Because climate change is a global issue.
Right.
It requires a collective response.
Right. So we shouldn't exclude countries based on their political systems or ideologies.
Exactly.
However, there are legitimate concerns about the Taliban's commitment to addressing climate change.
Oh, yeah. I mean, given their track record on human rights and environmental protection.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see how their participation unfolds.
Yeah.
And whether they're going to be genuine partners in this effort.
Absolutely. I mean, their actions will speak louder than words.
So speaking of actions,
Yeah.
what are your expectations for COP29? Do you think it'll be a turning point?
I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
The urgency is clear.
Yeah.
And there's growing public pressure for governments to take decisive action.
Right.
But there are also, significant political and economic obstacles to overcome.
It's about finding that balance, right?
That is.
Between ambition and pragmatism.
Exactly. COP29 won't be a magic bullet.
Right.
But it could be a step in the right direction.
Right.
The key is going to be translating words into concrete actions that lead to actual emissions reductions.
So we've covered a lot of ground on the climate front,
Yeah.
exploring the challenges and opportunities ahead of COP29. Now let's shift gears and delve into another fascinating topic.
Right.
China's expanding global influence,
Okay.
particularly in South America.
Interesting.
What's driving this expansion and what are the implications?
Well, China's rise as a global economic powerhouse is, a defining characteristic of the 21st century.
Right.
And their Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to connect Asia with Europe and Africa through infrastructure projects, is a key driver of this expanded influence.
And that initiative reaches South America as well.
Absolutely.
Right.
They've invested heavily in infrastructure projects in South America.
Like ports, roads, railways.
All sorts of things.
Energy facilities.
Yep.
I mean, we talk about that newly operational megaport in Shanxi, Peru.
That's a perfect example.
It's a perfect example of China's growing presence in the region.
It really is.
And as part of this broader trend, China is now the top trading partner for many South American countries.
That's significant.
So what are the implications of this?
It's a complex issue with both opportunities and challenges.
Okay.
On the one hand, Chinese investment can bring much-needed infrastructure development and economic growth to the region.
Right, and that can be a positive force for reducing poverty.
Absolutely.
And improving living standards.
For sure.
But there are also concerns about potential downsides.
Yeah, like growing indebtedness to China. Environmental degradation. The potential erosion of democratic values.
So it's about finding that balance
It is.
between welcoming investment and protecting national interests.
Exactly. South American countries need to carefully manage their relationships with China to make sure they benefit from those economic opportunities,
Right.
while also mitigating the potential risks.
And this is where the idea of strategic autonomy comes in, right?
It does.
It's about diversifying partnerships and maintaining the ability to make independent decisions.
Exactly. They need to avoid becoming overly reliant
Right.
on any single external power.
Right. Whether it's China or the United States.
Exactly.
It's about navigating a complex geopolitical landscape
It is.
and charting a course that serves their own national interests.
You got it.
And that requires,
Yeah.
skilled diplomacy, strategic thinking,
Yeah.
commitment to regional cooperation.
Absolutely.
So we've explored the dynamics of China's growing influence in South America, highlighted the potential benefits and the potential risks.
Yeah.
Now let's take a step back and consider the broader implications
Okay.
of China's rise on the global stage.
Right.
What does it mean for the existing world order?
Well, China's emergence as a major global power is arguably the most significant geopolitical development
Wow.
of the 21st century.
Yeah.
It's challenging the existing world order,
Right?
which has been, dominated by the United States and its allies
Right.
since the end of World War II.
It's a shift in the balance of power.
Exactly. China's economic might, their military modernization,
Yeah.
their increasingly assertive foreign policy.
Right.
It's reshaping the global landscape.
And we're seeing this play out in different areas.
We are, trade disputes,
Yeah.
technological competition, the formation of new security alliances.
Right.
The U.S.-China relationship is increasingly characterized by rivalry and competition.
Yeah.
And other countries are kind of trying to figure out
Yeah.
where they fit into this new geopolitical reality.
It's a multipolar world in the making.
Precisely. And this transition is not without its challenges.
Of course not.
There's a risk of,
Yeah.
miscalculation, escalation, conflict.
So how do we manage this transition?
Well, it requires open communication, dialogue,
Yeah.
a willingness to find common ground.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we live in an interconnected world
Yeah.
and that cooperation is essential
Absolutely.
for addressing global challenges.
And that includes finding ways to manage competition responsibly.
Yes.
And avoiding those zero-sum dynamics.
Right.
Where one side's gain is the other side's loss.
Exactly. It's about striking that balance between cooperation and competition.
Yeah.
Recognizing that there are areas where we can work together.
Right.
And areas where our interests might diverge.
Well said. Well said.
So,
I've covered a lot of ground today.
yeah, we have.
Conflicts, climate change, China's expanding global influence.
It's a lot to process.
It's clear that we live in,
Yeah,
a complex and rapidly changing world.
that's for sure.
And that's why it's so important to
Yeah.
stay informed,
Yes.
to engage in critical thinking, and to participate in these meaningful conversations
Absolutely.
about the challenges and opportunities that we face.
We can't afford to be passive observers.
Right.
We need to understand these issues.
Yeah.
Critically analyze the information.
Yeah. That we're receiving and participate in these dialogues.
It's about being active citizens,
Exactly.
not just in our own communities, but in the global community as well.
And it's about remembering that even amidst all this complexity, uncertainty,
Yeah.
there's always hope.
Yeah.
Our actions, no matter how small they may seem,
Right.
can contribute to a positive change.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing, isn't it, how interconnected everything is?
Mm-hmm.
As we've been talking about these global events,
Yeah.
it just strikes me how often what seems like a local issue can actually have ripple effects across the whole world.
Yeah. It's like that butterfly effect thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Where even small actions can set off this chain of events with far-reaching consequences.
And it's like, take, for instance, the conflict in the Middle East. It's not just, a regional concern.
Right. It has an impact on, global energy markets.
Yeah.
Influences political alliances.
Yeah.
And it obviously has a profound impact on humanitarian efforts all over the world.
Yeah, we can't forget about the human dimension either.
Right.
The stories we've discussed, like the tragedy in Tyre, they really remind us that behind all those, geopolitical maneuvers are real people whose lives are being, deeply affected.
It's a stark reminder that we can't just view these events as, abstract news stories. There are
real human consequences.
Real human consequences to everything that's happening on the world stage.
Absolutely. It's about, finding that balance between understanding the bigger picture and acknowledging those individual stories that kind of make up that larger narrative.
And speaking of individual stories, the UN Climate Conference is going to be bringing together this diverse group of people, each with their own, perspective and agenda.
Exactly.
We already mentioned the Taliban and their unexpected participation.
Yeah. Their presence at COP29 raises, some valid concerns about their true commitment to climate action.
Right, especially given their past record.
Yeah.
But I think it also presents a really unique opportunity.
It does.
For dialogue and engagement.
For sure.
It's a chance to understand their perspective, hold them accountable, and potentially even find some common ground on this crucial issue that affects us all.
It really underscores the fact that addressing climate change requires global cooperation, even with those we may disagree with on other issues.
It's a test of our ability to work together, even amidst political differences, to solve a problem that, transcends borders and ideologies.
That's exactly the kind of challenge that defines our world today.
We're facing all these complex issues that require, collaborative solutions, innovative thinking, a willingness to bridge divides.
It's daunting, but also invigorating.
Yeah, I think so.
In a way, it feels like we're at this pivotal moment in history where the choices we make, both individually and collectively, will have a lasting impact on the future.
Couldn't agree more.
So where do we go from here? Wow. We've unpacked a lot of information.
We have.
Explored the interconnected nature of these global events, highlighted the challenges and opportunities that we face.
Good lot.
What's the key takeaway?
I think the most important message is that staying informed and engaged is crucial. We can't afford to be passive observers.
Right.
We need to understand these issues, critically analyze the information we receive, and participate in meaningful dialogue.
It's about being active citizens.
Exactly. Not just, in our own communities,
but
in the global community as well.
Absolutely. And it's about remembering that even amidst the complexity and the uncertainty, there is always hope.
Right.
Our actions, no matter how small they may seem, can contribute to positive change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we leave you with a few questions to ponder.
Okay.
How will these global events continue to shape our lives in the coming months and years?
Right.
What role will we play in shaping the future that we want to see?
Big questions.
And ultimately, what kind of world do we want to create for ourselves and for future generations?
To us.
We encourage you to keep exploring, keep learning, and keep engaging with these crucial issues.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this journey.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
It's been a privilege to share these insights with you.
It has.
Remember, in a world in flux, knowledge is power.
It is.
And hope is our guiding light.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
If you enjoy our daily news podcast and want to stay updated, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell for notifications. Your support really helps us bring you the latest news every day. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.